Right, welcome to today's meeting of the Environment Committee. My name is Andy Stafford and I'm chair of the committee. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you've left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you're deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphones when speaking. Right. Well, welcome everyone, and we've got a bit more of a prompt start than last time. Agenda item 1, appointment of substitutes.
We have Councillor Ditter for Councillor Altar.
Okay. Item 2, and do I have any declarations of interest? Louise?
I'm an allotment holder.
Okay, if that's all, we'll then move on to item 3, public participation, and we have Paul Snooks from the Worcester Environment Group.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you all. I sent you all an email, it was either last night or this morning, about what I was going to speak to today, and sent you a PDF of a document that a Dr. Phil Sterling shared with several councillors and officers on a Zoom talk several months ago, where he demonstrated what they've done down in Dorset County to take how they maintain their grass verges and grassland spaces. As you no doubt know, we tried a pilot of this in Dugdale Drive in Warndon Villages. It has been extremely popular. There was an understandable fear that after having been cut for 25 years, that regularly that people would be outraged and worried about it. It turns out that the vast majority of people are very much in favour of it. I recommend, if you get the time, to go and visit in Dugdale Drive to see the verge there. There's also an information board that we've put up in conjunction with the City Council that gives lots of information with a QR code. Andy Roberts explaining how to use it the other day on social media. It takes you to our website that gives you lots of information. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk tonight. In my experience, one of our briefs as a charity is to educate and inform people about the environment. And when we explain to people what we're doing there at Dugdale, there's almost universally a really positive response. People aren't used to it, and they're a little bit surprised at first, but when you actually explain it. So in the email that I sent, I'd very much welcome the opportunity to walk and talk with each of you in your own wards. I've done that with 1 or 2 councillors already. I'd be very happy to meet you up at Dugdale if you wanted to see what we've done there in Dugdale Drive and a few other spaces. That's what I primarily came here to do today. And in the email I sent to you, there's a list of 6 positives there. You can reduce how often the grass needs cutting. It can be cut and collected twice a year rather than cut every 2 weeks. It can reduce costs, of course. And in that email that I sent you, there's a document that shows a table that shows you how over 5 years, buying the cut and collect machines, you can actually be ahead financially with the new machine. So that is really worth having a focus on. It's absolutely fantastic for wildlife. I went around with a couple of officers, Mark Bayliss and Mark Worrell, recently, and I think they must have thought that I'd tipped out a box full of butterflies before they arrived. It was just heaving with butterflies and bees and so forth. And so it's been a very positive experience, and we'd like I understand from talking to the officers and to various councillors that the ambition is to start rolling this out throughout the city. And I would welcome the opportunity to walk and talk with you in your areas, in your wards, to look for opportunities where you think we could do the same regime and benefit your community. That's me finished.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. And I'll certainly would recommend that councillors go and look at Dugdale Drive and see what's being created there just by changing the mowing methodology, and also meet up with Paul so he can sort of explain what's happened there, because it was really quite fantastic results. Okay, on to item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. Do we have any comments on them? No? Okay. On that basis, I'll sign them as an accurate record of the previous meeting. On to agenda item number 5, which I think, Paul, you might be interested in. Over to you, Lloyd.
Chairman.
Apologies, sorry, are you waiting for me? I didn't hear an introduction. I can't hear the meeting.
Ruth, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Ruth, sorry. My microphone wasn't on. So yeah, feel free to take us through the report, Ruth. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the environmental community grants. Just to give you the background to this item, following the approval of the environmental sustainability strategy last autumn, as members will recall, the action plan for the first phase of delivery of that strategy was then approved by committee back in March. That action plan proposed setting up environmental community grants, and this is the detailed proposal that I bring before you this evening. These grants are intended to encourage grassroots environmental action from all types of community organisations across the city. That might be residents groups, friends of groups, any kind of community organisation. Facilitating and encouraging action in this way from residents across the whole city was recognised as a vital way in which the council can deliver on the ambitions of our environmental sustainability strategy. These grants are intended to work alongside the existing community grant scheme, providing organisations with the opportunity to apply for a small amount of funding, and that will be between £500 and £1,000. And that would be either to undertake a small project, if, for example, they had a small amount of land that they wanted to put bird and bat boxes on, for example, or to provide a stepping stone to being able to apply for a larger grant amount, if it's to sort of prove that there's a need for something, or just to prove that the group is able to deliver projects. The funding could also be used to match fund other pots as well. And it's hoped that through these smaller grants, we can attract interest and action from groups across the city who perhaps aren't in a position to apply for the larger grants that we currently offer. In order to ensure that the projects that we fund do work towards the aims of the strategy, to be funded, then grants must meet one of the objectives. And these sort of criteria listed in 3.4 of the report. So, for example, projects could result in a direct reduction in emissions if, for example, there will be an energy usage reduction, for instance, or it might be to enable a future reduction. One group already uses a thermal imaging camera to help residents see where heat loss is occurring around their home. So that would be an example. Funding something like that would be an example of enabling a future reduction in carbon emissions. It might be that we have projects that will benefit the natural environment or reduce waste, for instance. Clearly, the individual impact of these projects will be fairly small, but it's hoped that, as I say, these will generate that really important grassroots community action that we need, and ensuring that across the city, people feel a way in which they can be involved in the delivery of the strategy. In line with the indicative figure that was given in the action plan back in March, £20,000 is requested, and that is proposed to come from the agreed £100,000 enabling budget for the delivery of the strategy. So far from that budget, £7,000 has been approved, and apologies, there is a mistake in tonight's report regarding that figure. But that was for the Heat Networks feasibility study. Since that agreement of that amount, the Heat Networks Delivery Unit, which is a government unit, have actually offered Worcester a fully funded study. So that £7,000 for that work is not required. Therefore, at the moment, none of the £100,000 has been allocated. It's proposed that the grants will be administered by the team who deliver the existing community grants, and the process to apply will be in line with the value of the grants that are proposed. So it will be as simple and streamlined as possible. I hope that kind of introduces it. Obviously, happy to fill in any more information required.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Do we have any speakers?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of small points. I love the way Ruth keeps referring to using the metaphor she does, which are all very environmental, green sheets and all that sort of thing. But this is obviously aimed at community, a community approach. And I wonder whether under 3.5, the applicants will be required to demonstrate the following. Whether a community approach needs to be in there. And I'm thinking, really, I'm not absolutely sure about this, but if somebody wanted to do something on their own for themselves as a pet project, would that be appropriate? And it may well be. So it might fit in with Ruth's grassroots, but I just question that. And then the other one, just for interest, would self-managed allotments be the sort of organisation could make application?
Ruth?
Happy to answer, thank you. So I think that's really interesting, actually, around the community involvement, and I'd be happy to kind of discuss that. I was envisaging that we would be happy for organisations, perhaps if they wanted to do something very specific to themselves, because of the value of being able to promote that. So even if it has only benefited that one organisation, actually there's quite a lot of value in being able to promote that across the city. In terms of self-managed allotments, essentially the criteria as we've discussed it is that it has to be a group, so it can't be an individual. So we would expect the organisation to have a group bank account and for the grant to be paid into that. We wouldn't be able to pay into an individual's, and that's in line with the existing community grants.
Do we have any other speakers? Any questions from anyone else? Richard?
Chair, I just wonder whether there's any ammunition or opportunity here to link in to organisations such as Worcester Community Trust. We've got lots of community centres around the city where there's a lot of community activity underway. And it seems to me this is an opportune moment for them to be proactively approached to try and give them some encouragement to make an application for funding for specifically for youth projects to raise awareness of environmental issues. I'm assuming this kind of grant would be permissible under this kind of scheme.
Ruth, do you want to comment on that?
I must admit, I might have to refer to colleagues whether, because obviously we have an existing relationship with Worcester Community Trust, I don't know if they are seen as eligible for our community grants. Certainly, I like the idea, particularly funding youth projects. I think that could be really interesting, but I would have to discuss that with senior leadership to see if that was permissible.
Chair, just to clarify, WCT would be classed as a community organisation, and I think as part of this, Ruth referred to the fact that the community services section will be administering the grants. So they've already got a network to be able to share, schemes and opportunities with a wide range of community organisations. So we'll certainly push that out, and WCT will be one of those recipients.
Okay.
Move the recommendation, Chair.
Okay, on that basis, if, all those in favour of the recommendation? That looks unanimous to me.
It was purely down to Ruth, it was.
Yeah, yes, thank you very much for your presentation on that topic, Ruth. And I now want to let Phil Gilmore into the meeting via Zoom. Can you hear us, Phil?
Yes, yes, thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, excellent. So we're now on to
Can you hear me?
Agenda item. Yep. There might be a slight delay. So we're now on to agenda item 6, which is the review of the delivery and management of allotments. And I shall hand over to Phil Gilmore to introduce this item. Over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. As you'll recall, a report was brought to committee on the 25th of May, progressing work that had been done throughout the year and even into last year. I've taken the allotments forward. And as part of that, a recommendation was to move to option 2 and to appoint an allotment officer and to engage in further consultation with stakeholders. So we've been one of the findings from the National Allotment Society report was that a lot of the documentation for the allotment service was not really up to standard. It wasn't really fit for purpose. So what we've been doing is actually working on a new tenancy agreement, a role profile for the allotment officer, and the role profiles of the site reps and forum going forward. So in doing that, and given the limited time that we've had sort of minimal engagement with the allotment holders. In fact, it goes far as to say we recently contacted them to get their views on the NAS report, which we released about a week ago, and we've sort of set up a feedback methodology for them to come back to us on that or on any other subject. So at this stage, where we've got to is that we're working on the documents. We're hoping to have them ready fairly shortly. And so the recommendation to the committee, and the recommendation has actually changed slightly than what you've got in your papers, but Lloyd will explain a little bit about that when I finish. But obviously we recommend that you note the contents of the report, that you approve the recruitment of a dedicated allotment officer. Lloyd will explain that that's not quite the right recommendation. That further engagement with stakeholders and interested parties has commenced and will be ongoing, and that a further note will be presented to the committee in October. What we were hoping to do as well was that once we've done some work, once we've got to the stage where we think the documentation is of interest to yourselves and is in a sort of final draft, that we bring that to you to review as part of this process. And then once you're happy with it, we can then engage with the stakeholders and allotment holders to get their views.
Are you finished with your brief, Bill?
Yes, sorry, I couldn't tell you people could hear me. So yeah, so that's the end of my brief. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
I'm concerned that we're still having these hybrid meetings, and the acoustics in this room are appalling. It's at the best, now we actually have some volume this time, but at best it's possible to hear about half of what's being transmitted. I don't know why we're still doing meetings this way, and I hope very much that this is the last time we ever have to do this.
I agree with you, Simon. I think we need to have officers in the room for future meetings. Lloyd?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just an apology to members around the amendment to the recommendations. Everybody's got a copy of that, or should have a copy of that in front of them. We've left a paper copy in front of your microphones. Once we published the report, in my faux pas, it was brought to our attention that in terms of our constitution, policy committees don't have responsibility for approving appointment of posts or approving recruitment of posts. What committee can do is allocate an amount of money, but then it's for the managing director to make final approval on whether a post is recruited to or not. So the recommendation change in front of you reflects that. The managing director has been briefed on this project. He's well aware, is supportive of it. So if members are minded to approve the amended recommendation tonight, there would then be a short paper back to corporate leadership team, just for the I's to be dotted and the T's to be crossed. But the key change to the recommendation is that committee are asked to approve the allocation of up to £35,000 from the transformation fund, which will then be subject to managing director approval for a dedicated allotment officer resource. And then the other part of this is this covers us off for a fixed period for the remainder of this year, and then for us to be able to sustain this post into the future, and that will be one for budget setting during the autumn. So hopefully that covers it off, Chair. I would suggest, Chair, just to be safe and sorry, yes.
No, if someone could move the amendment, and then we can discuss the amended recommendation. So could we just take a vote on the amendment so it becomes a substantive recommendation?
The reason I'm asking is just a point of clarity. All officers are dedicated, but what does dedicated mean in this sense? Does it mean that the total time they will spend will be on allotment duties? Okay, brilliant.
Andy, all I want to do is make the amendment, the recommendation we're going to debate. When that's all I want to do.
So next year, if this officer is dragged off to do the city show or something, I'll be able to know.
So all we're doing is changing the recommendation. We're not approving the recommendation at this stage. Okay, so all those in favour of
And another clarification before you do. The 35,000, which to allotment holders will be a lot of money, is that with on cost or is that salary?
And Andy, all we're doing is changing the recommendation.
Before we agree it. I'm not going to agree to something I don't understand.
Okay.
So
Then we can debate it.
Please.
Go on.
Yes to both, Chair. Yes to both.
I want clarification as well. What does the fixed term mean? That seems to be stepping back from where we were prior to this amendment.
Lloyd explain that, but do you want to just cover it again?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Colin. So the committee is delegated not to be able to make a substantive change to the staffing role to the council. What it can do is approve an allocation for a fixed period of time. So what this is proposing is this will cover for the remainder of 21-22, and then in budget setting in the autumn, this committee, I am sure, will look to support a sustainable funding solution for this post.
So the rewording is basically recognising the limits of our authority on this committee. That's perfect. Thanks.
Okay, so this is a vote just to agree the change to the recommendation, not to. So, okay, so we now have a new recommendation, the amended recommendation, which we are now able to debate. Do we have any speakers on the amended recommendation? Okay then. So all those in favour of the recommendation as amended? Bill? Thank you very much. Now on to agenda item 7. Phil, I think, is going to stay with us, and this is the update on Lyme disease, which I believe Nick McGowan is going to brief us on. Hello, Nick, can you hear us? Nick, can you hear us?
I can hear you now, yeah. Hi, how's it going?
Okay, Nick, we're just starting agenda item 7, which is the Lyme disease update report. Could you please just introduce the item for us, please?
Yeah, no problem. So the committee will recall this topic being brought forward at the end of last year. Lyme disease is a bacterial infection transmitted by ticks. These are most frequently found in areas of long grass. Not all of them carry the disease. Unfortunately, infection rates are relatively low nationally, as shown in Appendix A. That said, if left undiagnosed, this illness can be quite severe. Because of this, we are launching a public awareness campaign to help protect members of the public who frequent these at-risk areas. The Worcestershire County Council are also doing the same thing, similar campaign with their countryside green spaces. So we have decided to partner up and deliver a uniform message We've chosen to use a poster provided by the charity Lyme Disease Action, that's Appendix B. As these ticks, although they are rare, are found in areas of long grass, we're going to install these educational posters over Worcester's 24 nature reserves and conservation areas. These will be situated on all notice boards and main points of entry. So if there are any further questions, I'll be happy to take those.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick. Do we have any speakers on this item? Councillor Udall?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you personally to yourself for ensuring this gets here to the committee today. And it's been a long time coming, and I appreciate seeing the report. I think the Appendix A underestimates the actual impact of Lyme disease. I'm aware of people in Worcester who've received Lyme disease tick bites in Pitmaston Park, for instance. I've been told of people receiving bites in city centre. So it is quite prevalent, and it is quite endemic in all parts of the city, and for that matter, the country. So there is a genuine problem out there. It's underreported for a variety of reasons, mostly about public recognition. But what is being suggested here, I think, is a good first step. And I'd like us to see this proceed as quickly as possible, and then to have a feedback and impact review come back to this committee in November, so we can analyse the data and any impact which has happened, and consider where we go from there to have a more permanent campaign to actually keep informing the public about the risks involved, and to stress how they can be avoided. So yeah, let's have a short, intense campaign over the summer as suggested, but I would like to see the impact of that reported back to us in November, so we'll be able to determine what further action we can take. If that helps, Chair, I'll move the recommendation with that as a slight amendment.
Do you have any other speakers? Okay. Councillor Norfolk?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. The report specifically calls out Lawn Brook. Are there any other areas in the city impacted by the ticks?
So the research does state that the areas at risk are most commonly areas of nature, long grass, brambles, that kind of thing. So we're mainly going to focus on these 24 nature reserves. So that's just to name a few: Warndon Wood, Perry Wood, Bronxwood Hill Meadow, Lawn Brook. The reason why that's there was because that was the one area that this came from. So that was the basis of the concern, really. So that's why we put that in there by name.
Thank you.
Personally, I'm not minded to change the recommendation. I'm happy to discuss with Tom and officers in our agenda planning committee and use the actual process to determine what should come onto the future agenda. That's my view on the amended.
But if I may, Chair, I'm just trying to be helpful by ensuring that the analysis of any outcome of the work which we do is actually reported back to members. It's an issue of public interest, and have a report back to this committee in November is simply all that I'm asking for. And I can't see a reason why that shouldn't happen, even if it's just an information report, so the public can see how successful or otherwise we've been. And then, if necessary, for us to actually determine whether we need to take any further action to support the campaign. It's an issue of public health as much as anything else, but it affects the issues about land in which we have control and ownership of. So I see no harm in having a report come back in November. I'd hope you would accede to that request to enable us to actually continue to monitor the situation and to see if we can do anything more to assist the public.
I stand by what I say. We've got a process to manage the agenda. I don't want to, circumvent that tonight via amendments to recommendations. Councillor Tom.
Yeah, Chair, I think it's reasonable that there's some kind of mechanism to close the loop on this, just so it doesn't get lost in the abyss forevermore, and we can get some kind of feedback. I wonder if officers can propose a way that would be very low effort for them. This could come back to committee without creating a burden for them, without creating unnecessary committee activity. Maybe officers can suggest a path forward, or what would be most convenient for them.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Collins. Yeah, notwithstanding, this is an important and serious issue, but I think Councillor Udall made the point. This is a public health issue, and it's not a district council core priority, I suppose, if want of a better word, or core service. So, we've been asked to develop a publicity campaign, which we've done, and hopefully members will sort of endorse that tonight, and we will get on with that. There are other avenues, as Councillor Collins says, about briefing members about the outcome and sort of benefits of what we've done, and we can do that via committee briefings, whether that be verbal or written. But I am slightly concerned about how we measure success. At the moment, the only thing that's in the back of my mind is the number of people that have seen the publicity campaign, but that's not being able to tell us whether or not there's less people having tick bites or not. So I'm just struggling to formulate in my mind how we'd measure success at the moment. That's probably not helpful, Chair, but
well, it's sort of backs up what I'm thinking. When you read the report, I don't think the City Council's in a position to monitor Lyme disease or tick bites also within such a short period of time. So I think if we can get an update just saying that the boards have gone up, I think that would be...
Yeah, please, you're making heavy weather of this. All I'm seeking is a report in November to say what has happened, where it has happened, and what the consequences were. It's going to be a page report, no more than that. It's not going to throw the whole system of the council out of all action and cause any mayhem or disorder. It's simply a system of enabling this council and this committee to review the actions it has taken and have a report back. It's not asking the world to take place here. It's just asking for a report back to committee, and that will enable the committee to determine whether it needs to take any further action. If we can't do that, have a report back on our own decisions, I don't see what the hell of the point is we're doing sat around this table. We need to have a report back to make sure that the actions we are doing in the name of the public are actually working. It's a simple request. It's not going to cause a major problem for anybody. Let's have a report back in November, say what happened, say what's the consequences of what happened, and see where we go from there. Because if it doesn't happen, I'm sure there'll be other ways and means which members may wish to raise this item. So let's work cooperatively on this to make sure we can work together.
Councillor Griffiths.
I can kind of see your point on this, Richard, but I have to say I think it's a little bit ridiculous to bring a report back in November. It's a signage campaign. Unless we're going to tell people that they must report tick bites, and it's important to remember not all ticks carry Lyme disease, and the ticks that do carry Lyme disease are rare. And it says here there's 20 reported cases in the entirety of the county in the past year. I don't understand what you think you're going to get out of this report other than something that says this is where we've had signage. What else can you do as officers? What else can they do unless they're going and standing in Lawn Brook, in Perrywood, in Ronkswood, and asking people as they're coming out of these areas to check themselves for ticks and report a tick bite there and then? I'm not sure how you can gauge the effectiveness of this.
I'm simply asking for a report to come back to committee to say how many signs have been erected, where they were erected, and what the consequences of their erection was. I see no significant problem in seeking that report, and if we fail to have it, I'll have to ask for it as a question in council, won't I?
I'll ask. I think you try and make it sound simple, but the consequences is no. I think this is all growing arms and legs. I think we can provide, all the council officers can do is provide an update to say the signs have gone up. They're not in a position to monitor the impact and consequences of those signs going up. That's an impossible thing for the council to do.
Chair, perhaps I can simplify this. If Richard wants to propose an amendment, if he wants to word that now, I'm happy to second the amendment so that we can discuss it, vote on it, and have done with the issue. Then we can leave it with a decision of this committee.
An amendment that we receive a report back on impact and review in November of this year.
You want to second that?
Second that.
All those in favour of the amendment? All those against? All those abstaining? Okay, so the amendment was lost. I will ask officers to provide a member's brief saying when the signs have gone up and what locations, so that they can demonstrate that they've fulfilled the commitments they've made in this report. And I think that's as far as the council should go. So can we now vote on the recommendation as written on the papers? All those in favour? Okay, now on to agenda item 8, the Q1 performance report, and I'll hand over to Lloyd to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, this is the Q1 performance report for 21-22. So this is the first time that we're reporting back on the new set of key projects and performance indicators the committee would have approved towards the back end of the last financial year. Chair, you'll note that reasonable progress is being made across the majority of projects, and there's a range of performance in respect of KPIs. And just to note that we were late in receiving some of the data in respect to KPIs. We have had to provide some sort of indicative figures. Apologies for that, but I'm sure members have read the paper. So between myself and Phil, we're happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Lloyd. Do we have any questions? Andy?
Thank you, Chair. Paul's talked about the pilot on Dugdale Drive. But actually, it started before that. It started with the No Mow May, which in my area created a great deal of interest, and it sort of paved the way for this project we've got now. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and you'll be annoyed. I want to get it into the public area. So, it has been said that the project has been overwhelmingly popular, but that doesn't mean it's popular. There's a small number who are not satisfied. You get the question, what do I pay my council tax for, which is sort of pretty predictable. But other people would rather see everything neat and tidy, and that is given more importance than biodiversity. Okay, so I know, I don't have to ask, I know that we all want greater biodiversity, and we are ahead with the project. So how do we satisfy these people and keep on stream? Well, a little walk down that area, and you'll find today, if you walk down that area at eye level for a child, a briar sticking out. The strip that's been cut, I mean, to be fair to the people who do it, I know they're not the greatest job to have to keep doing that all the time, but when they do it at such a speed, they don't really cut the grass in a great way. And when they come to a post, the tendency is to zip round it rather than to do round the post. One lady, there's one little path that goes over to a row of houses, and that's been left and it's overgrown. My point is, and by the way, Chair, thank you very much for your attendance. It's extremely helpful to have you down there and taking an interest in this project. So my point is that you've got, I don't know, I suppose a couple of hectares there and not being cut. So you'd think that the little strip we do cut, it should be done really nicely and should offset that is set aside. And it's not there at the moment. So I'm not going to beat up the people who cut the grass. I'm going to blame Lloyd for everything. I mean, it needs, not to your level, Lloyd, but it needs a bit of guidance on just what the standard should be. And there should be a benefit to not cutting all that. There should be a little bit of a benefit to what you do. Now, the point of all that is at the moment, because of the timing of this, it's not an environmental project. But I think it's worthy of being an environmental project. And those sort of things are some of the measures that I would suggest. And I bet if it wasn't in council, in a council meeting and Paul could speak, we could have a further discussion and say what, and what other measures might be introduced into that project as outcomes. So that's a plea to add it to the programme.
Thank you, Andy. I 100% agree. We do need to have proper measures and standards around the areas where we're creating wildflower meadows to make sure that the strips and the adjoining bits are kept neat and tidy and all residents are as happy as possible. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Lloyd? Do you have any other questions on this agenda item? Tom?
Thank you, Chair. I know it's got complicated and I know that officers are working very hard on it, but I just feel I'd like to get it on the minutes again. The strategic play area development plan, I'm very grateful it's being considered well, and I think there's, we'll have some more conversations offline about this soon. It's a small point just to be minuted really, but the original due date I think was probably back in 2019 or something, not 2025. Yeah, just a small to minute and keep the emphasis on that one. We'd really love to get some input to the next budget cycle if possible. Thank you.
Anything to add to that, Lloyd?
No, the point's noted, Chair. We're just making sure that we've got the right people working on that project to be able to bring that back to committee in a completed state. But I was pleased to see the recent member session on Section 106 funding and better engagement with members around use of Section 106 allocations. And again, that's another avenue to be able to look at for that particular project.
And there was certainly a request in the recent weekly brief asking members for contributions of ideas of how Section 106 monies could be spent in their area. Do we have any other speakers on this item? Robin?
Thank you, Chair. Just on the public bin investment programme, I noticed that action plans will be issued to ward members following approval of the scheme. Will ward members have input to those action plans?
The answer is yes, but I'll hand over to Lloyd for a more complete answer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, yes, absolutely. We're committed to fulfilling the original committee decision. So officers Tim Allen and Mike Weaver will be approaching ward councillors over the next several weeks. The emphasis will be on those locations where we have multiple bins within a ridiculously small square footage of each other, to rationalise and make sure that overall we've got more capacity, although maybe a reduced number of bins in that location. But the emphasis is on the right bin in the right place, for the right reason, and not a reduction in bins. It'll be more on a sort of priority location first of all, but officers will be coming to you in due course.
Thank you.
Do we have any more speakers on this item? Okay, so members happy to note the report? Great, thank you. That's with no any other business. That's the last item on the agenda. So I'm happy to close the meeting. Thank you.
Apologise. I'll bear that in mind for next time. Well, that was the point last time. That didn't happen last time.